Plato, the myth of the cave. And in one of his most famous works, the great Greek philosopher Plato tells the story of some men who lived in a cave. But the lives of these men were far from ordinary. Inside the cave, several men lived, chained to the wall. They were not criminals, but they had been imprisoned there since childhood. These men were bound by their feet with shackles, and their heads were held by chains around their necks. As a result, they could only see what was in front of them, and couldn't even see each other. All they did was look at the cave's back wall, which was illuminated by the light coming from behind them. On the other side of the wall, there was an elevated flame that lit the area. There was also a source near the wall where men passed by carrying objects and puppets at the wall's height. These objects cast shadows on the back wall of the cave, and these shadows were all the prisoners knew. The prisoners discussed the shadows of the objects, giving them names and purposes. The men who carried the objects sometimes talked to each other, and because of the cave's echo, the prisoners believed that the ones talking were the shadows. But one day, a newly liberated man saw a glimmer of light. His fellow prisoner was astounded as he saw the light from outside for the first time, which left him thoroughly confused. He scaled the wall, and on the other side, he could see the flame that illuminated the back of the cave. This innocent man believed he had finally seen the sun, the element that provided the existence of their entire world. This man started to see things he had never even dreamed existed, making him doubt himself, thinking he might only be a shadow. However, he couldn't dismiss what he had witnessed. Over time, his eyes grew accustomed to the new condition, and he began to understand more about the world around him. He realized that the shadows of the objects were not everything he had previously imagined. He understood that the sun was the true source of all light, and the world he had been living in was nothing more than a world of pure illusion. This liberated man began to live in harmony with this new reality, and his past in the cave seemed to have faded into the background. But as he passed by the cave once again, he remembered his fellow prisoners, with whom he had shared most of his life. They were still there, pressed and believing that the world of shadows was all that existed. The ex-prisoner decided to return to the cave and reveal the truth to his fellow prisoners, rescuing them and bringing them into the real world. He positioned himself between the men and the back wall of the cave, but his fellow prisoners didn't recognize him. They knew him as one of the best shadow recognizers there was, and therefore challenged him to identify the images in front of them. What was once easy for him was now nearly impossible, since his vision was no longer accustomed to darkness. Nevertheless, he decided to tell his fellow prisoners about everything he had seen outside and his experiences. The prisoners concluded that this light could only lead to madness. However, the liberated man was not ready to give up on his fellow prisoners and tried to break their chains. But the prisoners seemed determined to remain in the world of shadows because, for them, that was the only reality they believed existed. They were even willing to defend the chains that bound them,